Hello and welcome to the Sheep Seats. I am Leggy Video Dark Sheep, Matthew, aka Sheeps. Apologize that I don't know what's going on, but I'm joined by hopefully a couple of unleggy Sorare experts this evening. We have Hunter and Nick. Nick,
Howdy,
I
guys.
believe
Yeah, what's going on, everyone?
it's nice to have you guys here.
Ooh, you are
To
teleporting. It's awesome. New
uh,
superpower.
yeah, it's. And I also managed to not link the thing in my tweet, so the video in my tweet to say we are live. So we're just running on the usual all cylinders here at the Sheep Seats. um,
Perfect. All systems
so
go.
normally we are here drafting some underdog MLB contests, but right now we unfortunately don't have anything to draft. So I thought I would bring in you guys tonight to talk about Sorare MLB, which is the MLB like official, I guess, yeah, official, only official NFT. No, I guess they have candy stuff, but the only fantasy one. Is that right? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe
Oh.
so. Yeah. The only officially licensed NFT game. Yeah.
And so yeah, I've been secretly playing this in the background. I don't know, sometime last year, and the hype, maybe not the peak point of the bull market, but I started playing and I transferred some ETH into the wallet here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Hunter, you want to introduce yourself first and how you landed into Sorare?
Yeah, of course. And Matt, thanks for having me on the show. I've been doing a lot of interviewing lately, so it's good to be on the other end of the mic, if you will. So appreciate that. And yeah, Sober's been awesome. Been doing off base with Nick since about the beginning of the season. I think we started in game week 5. Just breaking
Sounds about
down
right.
each. Yeah, I think that's almost the beginning of the season. Breaking down each slate. We do our show on Thursdays, breaking down the weekend slate, and then we do Twitter Spaces on Monday when we have our lock time in the afternoon, and we break down the slate then. But yeah, Sorare. It's been fun. It's been fun getting into it in these NFT games. I was in a Rainmakers last year on DraftKings playing fantasy football. I have a background in daily fantasy, which I've kind of found a lot of people don't come from daily fantasy into Sorare, really. But I'm one of the few, and yeah, just really been enjoying the game and enjoying doing content.
One last thing: do you play any other sports on Sorare? Because it's sort of founded on soccer originally.
Yeah, so the first sport I dabbled in was NBA, but I really don't follow the NBA that much. Was never really an NBA DFS player. And then soccer, I would love to get into soccer one day, but it's just not really a sport I've ever been into and know much about at all. But yeah, for me, mostly baseball.
Okay. And Nick, how did you wind up in this realm?
In this weird corner of the internet.
Yeah.
So I probably came at it from two slightly odd angles. I worked in crypto for the last, I don't know, year and a half plus. And so like just being a part of the general crypto space, I was always like hearing about new projects. And when I heard about Sorare, I was like, oh, fantasy sports on chain, like that's pretty cool. But at the time it was only soccer. And while my love of fantasy extends pretty broadly, I know next to nothing about fantasy soccer. So I kind of
Yeah.
just put it on the back burner and was like, I'll keep watching. And then they announced baseball at the All-Star break, or it launched at the All-Star break last year. And I was all in, like preparing for that, trying to figure out like what would card prices look like, what would scoring look like before they announced it and all that kind of stuff. So I had played, years and years and years of points league fantasy baseball,
Okay.
and I love like American football fantasy and dynasty fantasy and all that jazz. So like the whole game made total sense, and I was like, oh, and cool, I own own these cards, own these players for, as long as I choose to hold the cards. I get it. I'm in. Like, sign me up. And how do I get involved in this? So I started writing about it, and yeah, Hunter and I hopped in and started like YouTube shows and podcasting about it this year, and it's been a blast. And really just like meeting all the people along the way has just reinforced how much fun this all is, because never before in like fantasy sports have I sort of showed up and been just like welcomed from day one of, hey, yeah, great, hop in, go win a contest and have fun. Like it's been fun.
So then I will let you answer the having worked in crypto. We'll hit that. I know. I think there's probably a barrier of entry to the system. We don't need to get into any sort of NFT debates or why things are NFTs and blah blah blah. But that's not really our goal here. But this one of the easy use cases that is you can see for how to use NFTs is sports cards collectible. We saw the whole Top Shot boom. I mean, that was what got me pointed at NFTs in the first place too. Just as a hobby collector of cards and stuff. So that made sense to me. So like what does someone actually have to need to know about crypto or NFTs to get into Sorare?
So I would actually say you don't really need to know anything to a large extent. So Sorare has done a pretty darn good job of, yes, cards can be denominated in Ethereum. That's sort of the means of transaction on the platform, even if they're showing you dollars. Most of that, I believe, is all done with ETH. But you can choose to view it in dollars. And if you have a credit card, I believe, unless they turned it off recently as they're building their fiat wallet, you could buy with straight up credit cards through, I think, MoonPay. And so you could show up and treat it almost exactly like DFS and not have a ton of issues and almost never know you're dealing with something that's on chain.
Okay. So then when you say on chain, Hunter, what's the basics of that? And does obviously like go super low level on people's concerns outside of some other ones, but for NFTs is like security and the idea that your stuff's going to get hacked. And so Hunter, like, how does the actual on-chain nature affect like collecting cards and playing the game?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that the Ethereum thing is definitely something that would turn off your more casual player. In DFS, you can just deposit and play with, USD. But, Sorare is different. It's not like you have to go to an external site like, OpenSea and buy your NFTs, and you can do everything right on the site. You mentioned Top Shot. It's kind of like that. Like that was a good way to onboard a ton of people, myself included, like into the NFT space, because you can just deposit money on the site, make your trades right on there, right on the platform. So I never really had any security issues with that. I mean, it's kind of comes down to trust too. Like, do you trust Sorare to not rug you? If you've been in the NFT space, like, and you were minting some of these like crazy NFTs, last year, maybe 2 years ago, it was likely that you could get rugged by some of these projects that you didn't trust, and it's happened to me. So yeah, there's a level of trust there, but I mean, this is Sorare. It's like a pretty well established site. They have partnerships with the leagues and stuff like that. Yeah, I think as far as it, being trustworthy, I mean, if you can get your head around, using Ethereum, to deposit and make these trades, I think as, crypto gets more adopted to the general public, I think people will, be more comfortable with that. And that would be the only hurdle for, let's say, DFS players who, maybe hear some negative highlights from Ethereum and don't really want to, deposit and have an Ethereum wallet on Sorare. They might not be comfortable with that, but otherwise, very secure in my opinion.
Yeah, and to me, the like concept of all this stuff viewed on Sorare is just sort of siloed on Sorare. like even if you're doing other things for the most part with NFTs and crypto, and basically once you put ETH there, it's there, and it's not really it's more just a regular account security that you have to worry about, passwords and phishing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And like one other thing, if you are the other end of the spectrum and you do, I don't know, have some sort of hardware wallet and you really want to preserve your assets in that way, like you can migrate the NFTs off of Sorare, hold them in like cold storage, and then bring them back if you ever wanted to play. So like they do both pretty well, where if it's on the platform, you can kind of not even notice that you're playing with NFTs, other than like they look like an NFT. It's a card. It's like got a serial number on it. But if you feel like it's the other way and like, oh, maybe I want to hold my assets off of there for some level of security later, and I'm just a collector, you can do that too. Sorry, my dogs are wrestling.
That's all right. As far as that, we'll get mostly more into the fantasy aspect of it, but as far as like collecting goes, do you guys see, maybe Hunter first, do you see an element of collecting to Sorare, or are you mostly in it for fantasy?
Yeah, I would say I'm mostly in for fantasy. I mean, you can make the argument like in years down the road, some of the 2022 cards could be valuable, that being the first season last year. For me, it's really about fantasy, buying these guys, holding them for the long term and using them year after year, and, trying to get guys, in the short term too, that you think could be good in the upcoming game week, or, in the few months ahead. I kind of look at more as a gaming platform than a collectible platform.
All right. So I'm gonna jump ahead on our outline here. Kind of, I think before we really get into the game, let's actually talk about cards. I'm gonna pull up my my website here, add that to the stream. All right. So basically, there are two ways to acquire cards that I know of. Well, I guess when you first start, if Nick, like, I don't know anything, or let's say I've gotten as far as transferring some ETH, or I figured out how to use my credit card. What's the first step to acquiring cards, or in this case, I know, maybe outline the free to play aspect.
Sure. Yeah. So if you're showing up and you have no money on the platform, you just want to play, you can do that. And it's called Common, where you'll show up, and at the beginning of the season, or I think if you sign up right now, you will draft a team where you're given kind of a set budget, sort of DFS-y. You have a total budget, and you get to spend that on whatever players you want as long as you stay within your budget. And that gives you a team where you can play for free and win cards that are worth real dollars. Most of the time you'll win other common cards and your roster gets stronger and you play again next week. And that's great. Sometimes if you really hit it out of the park, pun sort of intended, you can win really useful cards and work your way up to playing in the limited competitions without ever spending $1. Now, the other way to go about it is you've put money on the platform and you can go either buy limiteds at the initial auction, which you were starting to show, or you can buy from other managers.
Yeah, so the first thing here I was going to show is some these white cards are the commons that you're talking about. If we go back, I guess we could probably see what I started with, because they reset at the beginning of this year. So yeah, I kind of put together, I guess this would be my first set. Yeah, I'd like you kind of choose rarity. So I picked Corbin Burns to anchor it, and then kind of spent less of my starting salary on my infielders and stuff like that. But yeah, so let's go back to the market. Hunter, auctions are the first way that we can load here, that you can acquire cards. talk to me about auctions.
Yeah, auctions. It's a pretty good way to get value. Actually, Nick was the one who was telling me about.
Welcome, Bob.
What's up, Bob? Was about auctions at the beginning of the season. This is my first season playing. I didn't play last year. Nick did. So I was, in the marketplace trying to buy a bunch of guys at the beginning of the season, and the prices really were inflated. People were excited about the game. Maybe you didn't get the best deal in the marketplace at the beginning, and even now there's a bunch of guys that are overpriced, somewhat inefficient. But with auctions, I think you can get a pretty good deal on these guys. So Sorare will host auctions for players and have a certain time limit until the auction expires, and basically just players will try to bid and outbid each other until someone is the highest bid at the end of the time limit, just like a regular auction would go. Some of the, if there's a lot of hype around a player, Ellie De La Cruz comes to mind. He had his auction like really during, all the Ellie hype, which was the third game into his career, and when everyone was talking about him, and he had a super rare auction, and it ended up selling for something really high. And Ellie has, he's still a good player. I think I've seen some people talk on Twitter about how he might be more league average than some people think, at least now. But so you can. There's definitely an edge to be had there if you find some sneaky guys. But if there are some guys that are getting hyped up a ton and they happen to have their auction at that time, maybe it's not the best time to be in on that. So yeah, I haven't dabbled in the auctions all that much, but I stick to the market right now. That's what I'm best at. But curious to hear Nick's thoughts on some auctions and yeah.
Yeah, I'll hop in here, and that was a good point by Bob there in the comments. So that's the split I was kind of referring to. Of you can buy cards using your credit card here at auction. On the second half that we're going to talk about in a second, where you're maybe trading with another manager or making them an offer for their cards. I think it's set up a little bit different, but that's all subject to change because there is rumors of some improvements on that side over this summer probably. So we could get into that or not. But yeah, these initial auctions are great if you've got your eye on like some kind of under the radar guys. It's wonderful to hop in when they're not playing well, or usually the auction gets pulled if they're hurt. So it's kind of a good buy low. If you've got your eye on a select few, you can like watch them. It'll even send you an email saying, hey, this guy's up on auction now, and you can kind of try and pounce. The other way to do it, if you want to segue to the other half of things.
Yeah, let's go over to the manager sales tab.
Yeah, so this is where it gets unique, I guess. Is Sorare is kind of like you're playing Dynasty Fantasy Sports against the rest of the world. And so these are all other people's cards up for sale that you can readily buy or trade for. And so like they're all listed for a given price, but they're listed by specific managers, and you can go in here and make them an offer of ETH or of, hey, I've got 2 good pitchers, I want your Spencer Strider. Like all of that is doable within the system to go improve your team. And so if you like shopping on eBay, then the initial auctions are your jam. If you like kind of trading and doing 2-for-1s and swapping back and forth and trying to figure out like, oh, this guy's super undervalued right now, maybe I can go score one out on the manager sale because he's hurt right now and I can't find him at auction. You can do all these things. And it's all completely up to you on how you want to build your team. And I noticed as you're scrolling here, we forgot to mention all these different colors here are different scarcities. And so the yellow kind of gold cards are what's called limited. And so the max that they will mint in a given season, which we didn't get to last year, so that's why I say max, is 5,000. On the red cards, those are rare. The max that they will mint in a given season is 1,000. Super rare is 100, and unique, there's only one. Only one player in the unique tier for that card each season. So like one Spencer Strider for 2023. So naturally, those unique cards go for big dollars. and you
and
get
then
to choose which tiers you compete in. Is kind of the wrap to that side of things.
Yep, that's what I was just going to say. Then basically you use these cards in separate gated contests based on
Totally. Yep.
the rarity you want to spend on.
Yep.
I'm personally, invested in the limited portion of it, and have slowly been starting to build up a rare collection through good placements in the limited section. So I think with some patience, you can definitely go. I think it's harder to go from free to limited, competing at limited, just due to the amount of people that are playing in the limited is a lot higher. You really need get some good lineups in there, but it is possible to actually build up the tiers. So
Hunter and I have.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say Hunter and I have a couple friends over on Twitter that like they play exclusively on the free side, and we kind of helped them build their lineups to start the season, and they went through the progression, which is much improved this season. Of there were multiple common tournaments that you can play based on how long you've been with the game and how much you have already on the limited side, and a couple other quirks there. But basically, these guys were able to build a lineup and start to win limited cards as the season progressed. And where we sit now, like 2/3 of the way through the season, I'm pretty sure at this point, without spending a dime, he was able to at least field a limited roster. It might not be like hyper competitive yet, but like he came in for free and is actually competing at a thing that costs money. So it is doable more now this season than it was last season, where there was only, I think it was just one common competition, but now there's kind of a continuum. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I will add that some of those commons are only, I think there's some restriction on who can play in those too. Even if you own limited cards, you can't get into some of the common competitions.
Yeah. So once you've grown your collection beyond a certain size, you're gated out of that into other things. And so it is truly for, you're learning the ropes, you're figuring it out, and you're growing. And they implemented that this last off season, and I thought it was really nice for people new to the game.
So Hunter, when it comes to the cards, like you'll see here, if we go into Spencer Strider, I think he's a really good example of this. Let's talk about how year over year you can use, or the uses of a card year over year, and or changes that might happen year over year.
Yeah, so you have Strider here. I mean, he's a good example of that, because his cards from last year are all reliever cards, because he started as a reliever last year for the Braves. He was really good. He became a starter. And those are NFTs, they can't be printed again. They were minted last year. So he has the reliever position on them. So people that have those cards, I mean, they have a really high floor. You can play them at the reliever position. And obviously Strider is dominant. I mean, he's, one of the best pitchers in the league. But yeah, his 2023 cards, as you can see, the shinier ones here, they can be played at the starting pitcher position. So yeah, basically, it's like Dynasty. You buy the card and you have it for, as long as that player's career, whatever position he started at when it was minted is what you'll have it at. Same picture and everything. It's, the same physical card. So.
Yeah, and I think it's really important in light of certain other NFT games rules year over year. I think it's really important to understand that you can use them pretty much unrestricted in contests year over year. Yeah, I'm throwing shade at Rainmakers here. That's the thing that got me out of that.
Yeah, we'll see what they do with the contest this year with the 2022 cards, but yeah, there'll be some smaller contests for that. We'll see.
But yeah, okay. So let's see what we got next. So what about the actual game? Or I guess, is there anything else you guys want to get into about actually collecting cards or buying and selling, or not really so much selling aspects, but buying?
I mean, I just want to say, I don't know if we talked about it, but like, as far as like building up cards, like Nick was saying, how you can start in common and like move your way up to limited without spending money. I mean, in the pro contests that are run every week, as you can see, if you scroll down here, like you can win in the limited tier. If you play limited pro, like the top 50 slots will all get a rare card, same as in rare pro, the top 10 get a super rare. So that's one way to move up, is if you prioritize these pro contests. You can win. There's also ETH there. You can see that was added somewhat recently. The ETH reward, 1,100 given out. So yeah, that's one way to build up. While playing in the lower tier, you can get cards into the tier above. I think that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
Nick, did they have that last year, Nick? I was wondering that.
Yeah, they had that last year. The ETH is new, but it's a great point because, like, when you're just starting out, this is a game of patience. Like, you're not gonna have, unless you have big bags or you're willing to spend a lot right up at the beginning, you're not gonna have a lineup that's gonna just win every single week. That's just not how baseball works, honestly.
Yeah.
But you can prioritize a contest where you can win better limited cards to build up your limited stock. Or you can do what Hunter just said, and you're trying to move up to rare, you can prioritize limited pro to try and win a couple rare cards and bulk that up over there. So there's always this give and take, because you can only enter a card in one spot, like one card, one spot. And so you're constantly building towards something better. And that's a really cool part of the game, but it's also a part where, like, it does take patience. Last season, I started in limited and could only enter into like one of the two because there was only two. And then by the end, I could enter into two and like a rare contest. And then this season, like, I can do more. And so it takes a while to kind of achieve your entry goals. And that's completely normal. It's not like even something to be worried about. That's just how this game works. And that's part of what makes it so fun.
Yeah, and the nice thing is it's not like TFS where you're putting in entry fees every contest.
Exactly.
You don't feel that, or you don't. I guess that reduces the urgency, so
Yeah.
to speak. And
your entry fees all up front.
Just thankful to hear Bob. He's also saying here that in season they can gain eligibility. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the Mookie Betts effect. So his newer cards have middle infield eligibility.
His newer ones.
Yeah,
not the
and
old.
So as
okay,
like where traditional fantasy baseball, everybody gets positional eligibility at the same time. Like, if you're playing on ESPN, all teams, all leagues, everywhere, Mookie Betts gets second base eligibility or whatever, when he gets it, because he's played 15 games. SoRare's not that way. It's just that the mint after the time he gets that eligibility, suddenly that new card has a new position on it, and it can be played differently than all the cards before it. So yeah, that's a great point. It can go both ways. Spencer Strider lost RP eligibility. People like Betts have gained eligibility. And that's another fun wrinkle of there's only so many cards in like Spencer Strider land that have RP eligibility, and those are valued very differently.
Yeah. And then the other thing about the value, I guess we didn't really talk about it too much, but let's jump back over to look at a card here. Is this percent number? So, Hunter, do you want to do the brief intro to that?
Yeah, Nick could probably talk about the experience better than me, but you gain experience as you play the cards in the contest, and then I don't know the exact like equation, but you get more points, topped onto that player's performance with the player that has more experience. Nick, do you want to talk a little more on that?
Yeah, so there's a really fancy equation where there's training lineups involved, and your players like level up, and there's a whole thing there. We don't really probably need to get into all of that, but essentially, as you play players more, they get an experience boost on top of whatever their base boost is. And so for a limited card that was minted this year, they have a base boost of 5%. They lose that after this year's over. So if you've been training them and using them in lineups and doing all the stuff, this whatever boost on top of that base is, that sticks year to year. So like those older cards that have a lower boost, those are boosted up there. So yeah, these darker gold ones, that 3% is stickier year to year because he's leveled up over time. Whereas these newer cards, they have a higher boost this season, but if you mint one like say the last day of the season, he's going to lose that pretty quickly, and you've got some catching up to do. So there's a little bit of strategy of you get a slight advantage for owning a card for a longer amount of time, or buying ones that have a larger boost.
Yep. Yeah, and also the cards at the higher rarity, they gain XP at a higher rate, right, Nick? I don't know.
They also have a higher boost too. So like rare gets a 15% base, super rare I think is 25, and I forget what unique is. It's like 40 or 50, I want to say.
Yeah.
So like they're just because they're a rarer card, they get a better base boosted score.
All right. So let's dive into the game a little bit. I will say that the Sorare MLB guide sort of is an okay introduction. I went through it when I started. There's still some of the more confusing elements, like the experience, and some of the stuff isn't super in depth here and a little bit confusing. But if you want to just get the basics of the roster and some of the scoring and stuff, I think it's a good place to start. So I got that open here. This is basically every lineup that you build in every one of those contests we were just looking at is made up of these, 7 players you can put into, or you have to have 7 players for a lineup. So we'll just run it down here quick. There's 1 starting pitcher spot, 1 relief pitcher spot, 1 corner infielder, which includes first base, third base, or DH, 1 middle infielder, so second, shortstop, and the interesting thing here is catchers qualify as middle infielders, and then 1 outfielder. And then there's these 2 flex spots. 1 flex has to be a hitter, and the other flex is any player. So you could have a pitcher or a hitter. And there's, some in the advanced discussions, there's probably a lot more strategy talk about the flex spot, whether you want to use the hitter or pitcher. But in general, Hunter, this is pretty similar to most fantasy games in terms of having pitching and then position specific slots.
Yeah. The main difference here from DFS is relief pitcher for sure. That was something that coming into this year, I didn't know a lot of relievers. That's not something you roster in daily fantasy at all. There are a ton of relievers to choose from. Usually you're going with the closer there. Those are kind of the guys you need to know. I think by now I can maybe name every closer on the team, but some of these reliever guys, you're not really messing with them anyways. Maybe, if they have a lot of games in the game week, but yeah, 1 starting pitcher, that's obviously going to be a super important slot. And then with each game week being, 3 or 4 games, it's going to be likely an ace, in that game week. Several aces typically going. So you got to make sure you nail that position. Corner infield is a pretty good position, first base, third base, DH. Those are some power spots right there. I mean, there's going to be some power hitters for sure in that slot. It's a lot easier to fill than, middle infielder, which, me and Nick will say a lot. It's a tough position to fill. You do have catcher in there, but, catcher's kind of weird because, on the weekend slates, like most catchers are going to get a day rest, so you'll see, some of the floor prices on the catchers, the big name catchers, Rutschman and Will Smith, they're not, the floor prices are a little bit lower than you would think on those guys. Outfielder, that's standard in most games. The extra hitter, and then the flex where you can play a pitcher in the extra flex. But I think, we've seen some pitchers have big games, but, typically the strategy would be to find a power hitter there. Those are the guys that have real upside. I know Nick has actually dabbled with putting a relief pitcher in there before and had some success. Adam Ottavino, always remember that one. Occasionally it'll work, on a weekend slate. But yeah, I recommend trying to find, power. I mean, the name of the game is home runs, and, putting a power hitter in that extra flex spot looks to be a good strategy.
Yeah. That is one thing we didn't throw up, is that it uses different sized game weeks. So There are 2 game weeks per every real baseball week. So Monday through Thursday is a game week, and then Friday through Saturday or Sunday is another game week, which is some fantasy sites, the NFBC has a similar breakdown of hitters and those, so people might be a little bit familiar with that, but it is a little bit different if you're used to, like, say, football setting a weekly lineup. It is a little bit shorter. Anything else on the basics of roster positions, Nick?
Maybe just one other thing. Coming from like traditional points league fantasy baseball, this sort of outline of only 7 slots was a bit shocking to me. I was super used to, you're going to start like 7 pitchers in your week, and you're going to start a catcher or maybe 2, and you're going to have 4 outfielders and 3 flexes, like all this depth. And what they did was they really condensed it down. And I actually think that makes this game extremely approachable, because like they took away a lot of those complexities and whatnot that you're used to from like regular fantasy baseball, but they kept enough of it where, yeah, corner infield is a different profile than middle infield, and relief pitchers, totally different mindset than even starting pitchers. And like, could I start a reliever in the flex spot? Like Hunter said, like, sure, you totally can. And with the added thing of relievers are usually cheap, like sometimes that's a good way to fill out a lineup. So there's a lot of fun dynamics here, even though like the lineup itself is smaller than a lot of people might be used to.
Yeah. And me personally, someone who plays all different games, DFS, Roto, mostly underdog at this point. It's this is an interesting mix between all of those, and I think that that's pretty nice for, depending on where you come from. You can have, there's a touchdown somewhere here that you're used to it if you played some sort of fantasy baseball game.
Yeah, they didn't go so far afield that it doesn't feel familiar in some way. So I think that's pretty helpful in learning, which is nice.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So let's pop over here to this other tab I got open, the actual scoring. So this is probably maybe a little bit intimidating. There's a few more categories than someone coming from DFS is used to, but in general, it's pretty similar. You have certain events that are worth 3 that you're used to, runs, RBIs, and then each type of hit is worth more. Home runs the most, obviously, and then in this case, there's actually, which unless you're playing on some of the most hardcore sites, there's usually not negative points for hitters, but there is negative points for strikeouts here, and negative points for caught stealing, which
to Hunter's chagrin.
What's the story there?
Oh, we have a long-standing Joey Gallo discussion about he loves Joey Gallo because he comes from DFS and strikeouts didn't count against him, and I can't stand Joey Gallo because I come from points leagues where strikeouts did count against him, and my leagues were like overly penalizing against strikeouts. So we've had very different experiences with the exact same player. So that's the backstory there.
For a period of time, like 2016 to like 2020, Joey Gallo was like the best DFS play because he strikes out a ton, but you don't lose points for strikeouts on DraftKings. And this is Joey Gallo. He hits like 2 home runs, 3 home runs in a game. It's always pretty cheap in DraftKings. So my DFS brain was like, oh, of course I want Joey Gallo. In so rare. He's also declined greatly. I mean, he's unfortunately
he was great at the beginning of the season. I had to hand it to you. There was a moment there where I was like, is Joey Gallo good?
At this point in his career, he's a one-trick pony. He can hit home runs, and he hasn't really been hitting home runs lately, so he doesn't really have too many tricks. But that's the story behind the negative strikeout point.
Okay, all right, yeah. And lately he can't stay on the field either. So,
yes,
other Twins.
At least he's not going negative.
Sorry, if he gets taken out,
had to sneak that one in there.
If he gets taken out of the game, he can't get a strikeout. There you go. All right, so hopping over to pitching categories. Excuse me. All right, so we kind of this is pretty classic. Some of these numbers are a little bit different, and depending on which fantasy site you play on, you don't always have negative for hits and walks. Like if you're used to FanDuel or Underdog, like we normally play, hits allowed and walks and stuff don't have negative consequences. But if you come from like a DraftKings background, they do have the negative consequences there. But this is pretty I don't know, run of the mill as far as scoring. You get the win. There isn't any like complete game, perfect game, any of those sort of bonuses, which I don't find that to be much of a detriment to playing.
I wouldn't be shocked if they get added at some point.
Okay.
Because they did add, the relief appearance there. That was a new ad this last offseason.
Yeah.
So I think it was meant to combat sort of the insane dominance of Spencer Strider, and it did. And now what has happened is a good relief appearance is like multiple saves in a week. That'll pretty easily outscore most of the top pitchers in a week, like most of the top starting pitchers. And so I wouldn't be shocked if we see some sort of like quality start bonus or something in future seasons to kind of even that out a little bit again.
Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to point out here was, the relievers do have their own scoring category, which in DFS and Underdog, they do not. In Roto, you have that's a whole nother story of them, saves being a category if you're in a league with holds or whatever. But they do score differently, and like you said, they have an increased value, but you have to roster one also. So jumping back to something Bob said, the SP based on the scoring and the upside of home runs and steals and that sort of stuff is what really gives the ceiling to the hitters. The pitchers can be sort of have a cap ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that, Bob. That's kind of like what I was saying. Hitters in the flex, I think is the way to go.
All right, so that's
I could talk about that for way too long, so I won't for now. But yes, floor and ceiling is a good way to say it.
All right. So anything else on scoring, guys? Otherwise, let's take a look at let's take a look at one of these contests for the upcoming game week that starts on Monday, just to get an idea. My process involves some spreadsheets and stuff. We'll skip that, but for the most part,
I love a good spreadsheet.
I know. Do you why don't you? You didn't shout it out before, but do you want to talk about your spreadsheet while I open up a contest here?
Oh, sure. So both Hunter and I have Substacks that we roll out. Hunter, you might have to say yours, but I put my ranks up on ethersport.substack.com, and that all comes from a very robust like player valuation spreadsheet thing that I built over the course of the last season and a half. And it's a way to combine like the ranks that we've all known and loved over time of like regular fantasy and so rare card values to try and spot like this player is highly ranked but really cheap, like that's a buying opportunity. This player's kind of lower ranked and really expensive, like that's a selling opportunity. So I've done a lot of work there of basically player arbitrage. And then what comes out of it is ranks against how much they cost. And that's really, really important for So Rare because we're all managing on some sort of restricted budget. So yeah, ethersport.substack.com. And Hunter, I can't remember what your unique URL is, so you might have to say that one.
Yeah, just first name, last name, hunterlangel.substack.com. Check it out. I break down every slate. I just kind of try to talk about everything on the slate, number of games for each team, go through all the starting pitchers, write up a couple of them, talk about bullpen, some games I think can stay close where I think there can be, an edge of closers, getting more save opportunities than other closers, or if a closer has an extra game, I mean, that's a huge leg up. Also break down some stacks I like, kind of coming from DFS, where stacking is like the first thing you learn. Stacking could be another conversation in Sorare. But talking about the matchup of the opposing offense and what I like there, and write up a couple of those. And also recap the previous week at the beginning of the breakdown. So kind of everything there, kind of overview of the slate. If you haven't looked at anything, check it out. I reference Fangraphs a lot. Fangraphs, my favorite baseball statistics site that I've used over the years. So lots of good data in there when I write up some players, and check it out.
All right. Yeah. If you follow me on Twitter, I got a new button device for trying to host these streams a little bit more streamlined. I thought it'd be fun to do this. We're going to use it for the first time here. Got a button dedicated to Fangraphs.
The Fangraphs
Well
button.
done.
I love it. I need one of those.
Very well done.
I don't know what that says about me, but that was the first after I got the move the do this sort of moving around at the screen action. I was like, you know what? The most thing I do on stream is sometimes open Fangraphs. So
it says you're in the right business.
So yeah, the input, we won't build a whole lineup or talk about. I think based on how much time we've used up here of our hour, we won't talk too much about roster constructions and builds and all that. So maybe we'll have to do this again and get a more advanced session if you guys aren't bored at listening to me. But
that'd be a blast.
I think the user interface of setting lineups, some certain DFS sites could look at improving theirs based on some of the stuff that they do, because there's some really nice stuff built into building lineups, like average, just how they lay out some of the stuff. I think they do a good job here, and they spruce it up a little bit, depending on the browser that you're using or if you're doing it on their app, but just sort of looks nice. And I think some of the sites have been using the same, player entry stuff forever. You just sort of go through your collection. There's filters, and this here's my common pool that I've built up. And the nice thing, they're pretty accurate about their probable pitchers over a game week, so you don't have to do a ton of research if you don't want to. I will shout out to all the people that might be watching this, of my normal viewers that are the BAT subscribers, but in his weekly projections, there is built-in Sorare projections in there too. If you are a BAT user and you don't know where to find those and you're interested, DM me or whatever. But yeah, that's when I said spreadsheets, it's mostly just relying on Derek Carty like I do for most things.
Shout out Derek Carty.
What's that?
I was just saying, shout out Derek Carty. I also like his stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, you sort of build your thing, enter your contest. Not really thinking here.
One ad as you're building up there in the filter thing, just because this starts to matter a lot in Sorare, that show games this week toggle. If you toggle that on for your pitchers, it shows you which day they're expected to pitch, which is kind of helpful.
Oh.
For your batters, it shows you how many games they have this game week, and that becomes extremely important in Sorare because more games means more at bats. So this toggle's super helpful if you're just getting started and you want to see who they're playing this week.
Yeah, here's a good example. You got, you're deciding between 3 games of JD Martinez at the A's versus 4 games of Alex Bregman versus, maybe some better pitching at the Guardians.
Exactly. So that was I think a new feature this off season, and that one's super helpful.
Yeah. So that's the basics of entering. We'll probably circle back here in a few weeks or next week or whatever. We'll see. I'll talk to you guys off air, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about in-depth strategy. But the thing I am interested to hear about, I'm gonna pull this out here, kind of as a closeout. let's start, Hunter, you've started this year. Where do you see yourself going on the platform? And, um, you know, do you, what do you see the future? Maybe it's a broad question. I was trying to
Yeah.
pinpoint
Always.
it there, but, what do you see for yourself personally and going forward?
Yeah, so I play a lot in the limited tier personally. I would love to, kind of do what Nick did last year. He said he started in the limited tier, move up to rare, maybe super rare eventually. That's kind of my goal, is to slowly work my way up. I really try to prioritize, limited pro, where if you get at the top, you can win those rare cards. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun in the limited tier. That's where in my newsletter, I prioritize the limited tier. I reference all limited prices where most people play, but would love to move up the stakes at some point. As far as, where Sorare going to go, I do think the game will grow. One thing I would like to see Sorare change is they have the lock time. So there'll be like one game at like 2 p.m. Eastern on a Monday, and the rest of the games all start at 7. And I'm like, can we just like get rid of that one game, and just start it in the afternoon, certainly from a content standpoint too. I mean, if you want to host the spaces, no one's really going to join if you host it at, noon Eastern. That'd be one thing, kind of a small change there. I know in DFS, you kind of have the standard, main slate all locks at like 7 Eastern. But yeah, maybe some bigger prize pools, maybe some more, Ethereum up top. That'd be nice. But yeah, I think love the platform, and I trust the team that they're gonna do a good job.
Yeah, I think there's some problems there with prize pools and gambling laws and all that. So I think that I do hope that they're searching, for solutions to that, because I think one of my big criticisms is how much money they've spent on advertising to people that are never gonna come onto the platform. I don't know how many people actually watching MLB TV that see those ads are ever going to come. So
I agree with
you. So yeah, Nick, we'll add that, where do you see yourself going? What are your goals for the platform? And then, the one thing, if there's the first thing, I'm sure there's multiple things you would want to change. Everybody, you guys strike me as the sort of guys that would want to tinker and build something out. But
you are correct.
The first thing you would want to change Sorare MLB, what would it be?
Okay. So yeah, as far as like a progression goes for me, I was lucky enough to kind of progress into rare this season, and that's been a blast. I think that's kind of where most of my focus will be. But my next goal, hopefully by the end of the season, will to be like building my first super rare lineup. I don't know if that'll happen, but I did win my first super rare card a couple weeks ago. So like nice. One step in the right direction. So that was kind of cool. So yeah, just kind of keep advancing, keep, building better lineups, and like, because I'm a total nerd, like more correlated lineups targeted at certain things, and being able to kind of mix and match as matchups show up and all that. So that's happened a lot more this season. Last season, I was like super bootstrapped. And so I just had my guys, and those are the guys I start. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And as your lineups or your kind of gallery grows, you can start to play those matchups a little more. And so being able to do that more in rare has been a blast this season. And like someday, pie in the sky, I hope I could do that in super rare, but that might be a couple years out.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's good to have goals. But yeah, Bob listening here he's a poster child for competing across all scarcities. So those are my goals right there, to just be Bob. Let's see. So one thing I'd change, they've already started this. Like last season, we saw 2 contests per scarcity. This season in limited and rare, we're seeing 4. But what I've noticed is like you grow at some point beyond being able to enter all 4 scarcities, and then you're like, well, shoot, now I'm making 30, 40, not yet, but soon, 30, 40 like training rosters. And these are what a cousin of mine would call Cadillac problems. Like, these are good problems to have. You've got a lot of cards, but like they did the Sandlot. That's new and that's been pretty successful. And I just want to see them keep pushing with that, like more ways to play cards, more ways to engage with your cards beyond just putting them in training lineups. So whether that's new contests or what have you, like I've been a pretty outspoken advocate for like underdog contests of, yeah, let me enter a lineup with a bunch of players that have been trashed for the last 3 weeks. Like, bring it on. That's a new way to play. I'm all in. So just more ways to play with your cards, and I think they're working on that. We've seen a whole bunch of different contests in the soccer side, even though I don't play much there. I kind of monitor it. NBA, we saw something completely different. So I think they're just kind of working on finding a balance, and I hope they keep tinkering with it, because 4 lineups is wonderful, but I could always enter more, and that would be my first thing I would add is like, yeah, just let me play more.
Yeah, that is actually pretty corollary to the one thing that I think should change is I think that in terms of having stuff for new users, I think that there should be contests without relief pitchers, because like you said,
Sure.
Hunter, I think that's a pretty big barrier to, if you're coming from DFS or underdog or that sort of stuff. I do think and even just as a casual fan, you're not gonna know, like you said, all of the closers or who's going to be a good value, but I think across the other positions, more people have more understanding. So yeah, that was the one thing I thought was that having that reliever position really is a barrier of entry. And if you take a look at the progression on DraftKings of the use of relievers in like the showdown contests, they've been like paring back the usefulness of relievers for the last few years, because that's something they don't want people to have to dig into.
It's more random.
More random, and there's a lot more research into knowing when to play a player, and seeing, oh, this guy does pitch every other day, this guy can pitch 2 days in a row, that sort of stuff. So and I'm at a similar goal myself. I've been slowly working into the rare tier, so I'd like to maybe in the off season or build up to switching over to competing at rare for next year. Maybe sell off some of my core common pieces to try and build rare for next year. So awesome, guys.
Off season's a good time to do it.
Yeah, and that there's a whole nother discussion there on when
we can get
when to hit into the market and when you should sell, and there's like, if that is that's like a whole nother game within this game that different people could get interested in. But there we are. We've
that's
talked
an hour for another time.
That's another hour of talk. So yeah,
if not more.
Hunter, why don't you just list where everybody can find all your stuff again, and where you find your work.
So you can find me on Twitter. It's at Hunter_himself. I made that when I was 16. And you can also find me
well done
on my Substack, as I mentioned before, hunterlangel.substack.com. You can find me on YouTube, Hunter_himself as well, where you can find Off Base that me and Nick host on Thursdays. Occasionally we'll be on Twitter doing Twitter Spaces on Mondays when the lock time is appropriate. And also on Twitter with my new YouTube show, Tweet Talk, where Sheep will be making an appearance soon. So stay tuned for that. And
nice.
And yeah, I think that's where you can find me.
Yeah, as someone who currently still at 36 is naming things Dark Sheep with numbers in it, I admire your looking ahead at the age of 16 and usefulness and sharing. And Nick, you want to shout out your Substack again and your Twitter?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at nmitchell11. and I think I made that when I was 16, so I was less creative. And you can find my Substack at ethersport.substack.com. And then, yeah, Hunter and I have the podcast / YouTube show that hits on his YouTube. And then I don't know the exact URL, but it's called Off Base on Spotify podcasts.
Yes.
And base is spelled with a 3.
You can't resist it. If you get, sometimes you just gotta outthink yourself and put numbers instead of letters.
Yeah, we had to go leet speak just to be fun.
Oh yeah, that's where this started, of course, as a teenager. All right, well, for Hunter and Nick, everybody, thank you for watching, and have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.